Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim. Join hosts Dan Melnick and Qasim Masood as they explore big ideas, limitless possibilities, and engage with visionaries, entrepreneurs, and thought leaders who dare to dream big, get inspired, motivated, and find practical tips for personal growth. Think big, dream bigger, and ignite your potential.
Welcome to Think Big with Dan and Qasim, and our guest today is Alex. So, Alex, if you want to go ahead and introduce yourself, tell us where you live and what you do.
Sure. Thanks for having me on. My name is Alex Highsmith. Like you said, I live in New York City, particularly in Brooklyn, Park Slope, and I call myself a non-alc aficionado. I co-own America's first non-alcoholic bottle shop called Spirited Away. I do sales for a brand we sell at the store called Pentire in New York City, and I also do a bunch of sober and sober curious event planning in the city.
Awesome. So, how did you kind of get into the non-alcoholic space?
Well, interestingly, I quit drinking about 8 years ago. I come from a recovery background, but I almost hesitate to say that because most people in the industry still drink alcohol and do all of that stuff. So it's almost unique, but I have been in the city for the better part of 10 years. I was in hospitality. Got out of hospitality when I quit drinking because it was kind of hard. There's a lot of drinking in hospitality.
Right.
Yeah, so I took some space from it. I should preface this with that I went to acting school. So I had a lot of that sort of interpersonal communication training that is very good for sales, it turns out. So when I got out of the restaurant industry, I sort of soft pivoted to like cafes and early morning stuff. And through that job, I met the owner of a small pet food company who needed a rep. And I didn't know at the time that he was just trying to get me because I was a bargain. But, I'm really thankful looking back now that he took a chance on me because I learned that I loved sales. I loved working with small businesses, helping them scale and grow and kind of realizing their potential. And at the same time, I was doing all of this kind of non-alc, sober, curious stuff because I was trying to figure out how to be social in the city again. And through that, I discovered Spirited Away, which had only been open for about a year and a half. So I was just a super fan at first. I spent a lot of money at the store and sort of just bothered, I like to say, Douglas, the founder of Spirited Away, who's still my co-owner. And it worked out that when I asked him if he had a job for me, he said, kind of, I'm leaving the country for a year to do non-alc research and development around the world. Would you like to run the store? And I was like, I'm an opportunist. So I said, hell yeah. And I was able to quit my pet food job, focus on non-alc, and the rest is history.
That's awesome. It's interesting now, right? Because it's becoming like a much more well-known thing, especially since COVID. And here in Austin, where I live, you see that they even have like non-alc bars and stuff like that. So I guess in terms of, obviously it's kind of hard to predict this trend, but how has the industry kind of changed since you first got into it compared to now in 2025?
That's a great question. Well, I'll tell you, 5 years ago, there was not a fully non-alcoholic bar and stage at South by Southwest, which is what we just sent tons of product over to help program. So that's kind of the scale we're talking about in terms of growth. This is like a 3-stage venue. All the bars are non-alc. Douglas started the store in the middle of COVID lockdown, and he, not because he had any issue with drinking alcohol, he simply was kind of bored of booze and not enjoying the feeling of alcohol anymore. So he knew a little bit about NA. He had heard about one or two brands. So the store, when he opened it, had 12 bottles, which is kind of adorable now because we have 210 SKUs and we're like bursting at the seams. There also used to be very niche products and sort of, founder made craft little things coming out here and there. And now we get a dozen inbound samples a month, and that's only a small sliver of stuff. We also have had our busiest month every month since 2024, since spring of 2024. We just keep getting busier and busier. There is a true demand. And as other non-alc bottle shops have cropped up, especially in New York City, where liquor stores are not legally allowed to carry non-alcoholic products, some weird old rules. Every state is different. But anyway, it's a sort of necessity to have specialty stores like ours here. When other stores closed, we got busier. So it wasn't like the demand was gone. It was that the people needed a place to go and there were just fewer of them. So it's growing something like I was just on another podcast this morning. It's a podcast day, which is not normal for me. At Johnson and Wales University, where their hospitality program is very into non-alc because it's growing so much. And their statistic is that it's growing 28% a year.
Right. Yeah. I mean, it's definitely growing a lot, but I think, relatively speaking, it's still like a very small market. So
Yes, yes.
I guess for the brands that are in this space or trying to get in this space, right? I think it's become very, very kind of like cutthroat because there's only so much
Mm,
shelf space. It's
yeah,
very difficult to stand out. So
yeah.
what have you kind of seen from the brands that have actually stood out and been successful, entering this space in this market?
Yeah, that's a great question. There are a few brands that have made it, which I think means they're in all the Whole Foods nationally. And sorry, my co-working space is getting a little rowdy. They've been acquired by Diageo, Ritual, for example. And then other brands, I think the barometer for success is a little smaller. It's more like they've been picked up by distribution nationally or even regionally, which means that they're supply chain is strong enough that they can support something like that, right? So, but I would say, having now worked on both the retail side and the manufacturer supplier side at the same time, the brands that succeed have a large marketing budget. That's really it. I think people and a lot of times creatives and brand owners, even if it's not a product, like a physical product, you get quite precious with it. And everything goes into the ingredients and the sourcing and the process, which is very, very important. But these things do not sell themselves. And brands like GHIA, which have sort of broken through and really found a customer base, people come in requesting this, for instance. They spent a lot of time and money on, I think, targeted ads, social media, and a marketing strategy.
For sure. But I guess like in terms of the actual brands, right? Do you think the ones that have stood out, like have had some sort of functional,
Mm,
use, like you have some that are kind of, THC or cannabis, CBD infused,
right.
or some other, functional, or do you think it's more of just this marketing aspect that you're saying in terms of just getting like the word out there and spreading
Sure.
awareness? Well,
I think it is all about the marketing. I'll speak from Spirited Away's perspective. We are so saturated with quote unquote functional beverages, mostly hemp derived and kava based beverages. Those are really, really popular. It is one of the more popular categories at the store. And I will say, Spirited Away, I often find that when I speak from the store's experience, it is echoed in like Nielsen data. We're in downtown Manhattan. We've been around for 5 years. We have a lot of foot traffic. So like we see the trends are pretty apparent and tend to be like our reads tend to be pretty accurate. But I'm sure someone is yelling at me over this podcast in their car. Um, but anyway, I say all that just to say this is kind of where I'm coming from. A lot of people don't like the functional beverages though, too. So
Right,
I would, like Athletic Brewing, for instance, is just a non-alc beer. But
right,
they worked really hard with a brand ambassador program
right.
before they got that Super Bowl ad last year. So they really had people investing in the product and the lifestyle. But that being said, kava beverages and hemp-derived beverages are crazy popular, especially with Gen Z, who isn't really about getting drunk anymore. Like alcohol kind of reads like cigarettes read now
Right.
to pop culture, but that's not true about mushrooms and cannabis. Those things are still definitely on the table.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that it's definitely growing, but just kind of to your earlier point that there's a level of differentiation and it does come
Yeah,
from marketing and ad spend. Like
yeah,
Breeze obviously has blown up on social media, but
yeah.
I know they spend seven figures a month plus on ads. So it's
Correct.
just, that's been, I'm sure, a big channel and driver for them.
Yes, I think they're pretty open about that on LinkedIn. The guys say, but
Yeah.
the growth has been exponential, so they're obviously doing something right.
For sure. And then in terms of like this category, I mean, where else do you see it growing? Obviously, that you're, working and running a retail store at this point, but do you see it running or growing in different channels like direct to consumer or, other retail or even, food service restaurants? Like where
Mm.
else do you see like some of the, like, the opportunities in this space
Yeah.
where these products are not fully there yet.
Such a good question. These are all things we're hoping to grow and scale into and have done in some capacity at Spirited Away. Corporate events, crazy opportunity, so popular. I don't know who decided that it was a good idea to get hammered around your coworkers. Like, it's just like an
I agree.
HR
Yeah.
nightmare. Yeah,
Yeah.
it's fun. The tipping point is quick. So I think corporate America has caught on to that. They really like the having an inclusive bar, providing education to those happy hours or the attendees or something. There's a lot, or catering is a huge opportunity. Event catering in New York City and distribution also, because I think I said this a little bit or alluded to it, but every state is different because of the way liquor laws are in this country. So many states distributors they can only be beer and wine distributors, or they have to be a solely non-alcoholic distributor. A lot of these specialty shops around the country are garnering relationships with bars and restaurants who are looking for an expert but don't have one available in their area. So consultation for bars and restaurants and hospitality groups is another huge opportunity.
Yeah.
There are e-com and distribution sites, Bardelia, the Zero Proof, the Zero. They get a little redundant. There's a lot of puns in this industry around drinking and zero. But yeah, and then of course, there's a case study for this too. I'm not sure if you heard of Boisson, Boisson, but they admitted now to us that they stole our idea from us at Spirited Away, which is fine because it was a good idea. But they opened and closed in about, I think, almost 10 locations nationally over the last 2 years. It was last spring they closed very quickly because they tried to do business to business, direct to consumer, and retail at the same time. And I think this is true across industries. It's very seductive to scale quickly when there is so much action happening around, but you have to sort of build in the education and community and finding your customer again, or it just can't sustain itself. So that's been
Yeah,
interesting.
yeah, for sure. I mean, yeah, it's definitely like as you mentioned earlier, kind of like this whole state by state thing. I spent some time in Utah, and there's kind of similar where it's like
Yes.
all their liquor stores are owned by the state, and if you want to sell anything that's not liquor, I mean, they don't sell it there. The store literally only sells liquor. It's like, state
Dude.
law. So, I've seen some, smart businesses where they like in the same strip mall have a adjacent store with these types of products and anything that you need for drinking alcohol. So I think that there's definitely some big opportunities there, just
Oh my
depending on
God.
each state.
Completely. Funny fact, I'm fun and funny. I'm from Utah. So I served tables in Utah as a server, waitress. And there is almost no way to better piss off a tourist than to tell them that before they order a second drink, they have to finish the first one in their hand. People don't like that. But there really are like crazy rules in Utah. And that's an extreme point of view. You'd think also non-alc would do great in Utah, but they're not interested in it at all. They really like their sodas, which is funny.
For sure. Yeah, exactly. So in terms of for your business, obviously that we're wrapping up Q1 here of 2025. So
Mm.
what are some of your biggest goals and objectives for the rest of this year?
Yeah, we are actually in talks to sell right now to me and my co-owner to two new partners who have a lot of experience. I can't name them yet, but my goal is to have that finalized. Takes a long time to sell a business. This is my first time doing it, and finding the right partners and the right ideology match is not easy, but we've been really blessed. And then I think another goal is to get New York City on premise, aka bars and restaurants, to fully adopt non-alc menus at a high level. So that feels somewhat like a one-woman pilgrimage at times because it's for all we talk about this trend doing really well, it still has yet to prove itself to a lot of industry professionals who alcohol's been the way it's gone for years. So
That's
my
true.
goal would be to blanket downtown Manhattan and lower Brooklyn with non-alc soon, and then to expand into e-com as well.
Yeah, ecom is a great channel. Obviously, that we're in that space, so I'm kind of biased towards it, but it's definitely a great channel. So, if you could go back in time to before you got started, with this business, what is the one
Mm.
biggest piece of advice that I'm wishing you.
Yeah. You don't need to take every interview. I'm very happy to take this one, but in an industry that gets a lot of attention and can be deemed trendy, you get a lot of inbound press, and not all of it is good. Or it sounds good, but do your research on the journalist and the publication to make sure. Dan Zing sounded so good. I was so excited.
Yeah, thank you, thank you. Yeah.
Yes. And then I would also say to be an opportunist even more. I said I knew how to do things that I only kind of knew how to do. And that worked out because I had enough know-how and confidence to figure it out. And I only wish I had gone further with that.
No, that's really good advice. So if somebody watching this wanted to reach out to you or to find your business, do you mind sharing your social media or website or just best ways to get in contact?
Of course. I have a public profile on Instagram. It's A High for Life. My last name's Highsmith. So AHIGH number 4 Life. Spirited Away is at Spirited Away NYC. And my inbox is open too, Alex at spiritedaway.co. I love hearing from people about the industry and their curiosities.
Alex, thank you so much for your time today. Of
Yeah, thanks for having me on, Dan.
course.